Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 15 of the What is Love podcast. My name is Aisata,
My name is Maggie.
and we're super excited to be back with the second part of the story that we started sharing a couple of weeks ago. We are sure that you're wondering, what's coming next? What's going to happen? Do we need a whole episode? And yes, you do need a whole episode because
Mhm.
that story went from, let's say, I don't know
Zip.
what lovey-dovey TV show to like all of a sudden like a detective
Mm.
investigative type of
Mm-hmm. We're
story.
saying NCIS.
NCIS, yeah, it became NCIS real quick. But before we, dive into these new episodes, I remember that in the last introduction for episode 14, Maggie and I were talking about red flags and what we think could have qualified as red flags as the story was evolving. And I remember that I couldn't think of anything specific that made me think, this is how the story is going to evolve, or like, this is a very, very big red flag. Beware, abort action.
Abort it. Abort it.
Miggy.
Um,
Mhm.
I'm thinking, I'm not going to get into too many of the specifics, but I know that for me, I felt that when they started having their first arguments, it felt to me like their conversations to try and make things better were never conclusive. And in her voice, I could hear some kind of discomfort as to things that she didn't necessarily push to have proper conversation communication about. So there are a lot of things that I do feel like she let slide, especially in their first arguments. And I feel like that was an important red flag, not necessarily for how wild he was going to act, but it set the tone for how much perhaps she held on to him so much that she didn't want to risk like even offending him during their arguments. That's number one. Number two, I
Before you
have
go
to
to number
say,
two, I disagree.
okay,
But
go ahead.
let me not go into like too much details because I guess let's not debate people's lives and decisions. But I think with like looking back,
Mm-hmm.
I think that night was so intense that
Mm,
that like she or any of them had room to truly process what had happened, because the,
mm-hmm.
the argument started, like, she voiced everything she wasn't happy about, and she brought up the things she wasn't happy about, and she wasn't hearing, like, she wasn't necessarily like giving up on what mattered for her. She was very upset and she made it clear. Where things shifted is when he decided to propose, and I think that's where things were a little. And like the moments in one night, you go from like extreme like frustration to all of a sudden, oh my God, this man that I love just proposed and I'm gonna marry him. I think it's very easy to like sweep all those things under the rug and like not think again about the way they argue.
And but that's exactly what I'm talking about. I do believe that by the time he proposed,
Mhm.
she was would sweep the things under the rug.
Yeah.
So that to me was the red flag. And the second one was that when they decided to plan their wedding,
Hmm.
Homeboy's mother was the one, as she said,
The
being
bridezilla.
bridezilla. And and like her husband to be had nothing to say about that. And for me, that was like a red flag setting the tone for whomever else than herself had more weight in a relationship that is
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah. And I always wonder, I'm like, at that point, what are you gonna do? You are engaged, you are planning the wedding, and your
Mm.
mother-in-law decides that like this wedding has to be like hers, and like that like she's not gonna let you have what you want. Are you
Hers.
now gonna say, whoa, I'm not marrying him anymore? Like, is that
I
enough grounds for
Do you know what? I feel like we need a kit. I think the girls need a kit of questions. How after like the fifth date or something, how would you act if your mother decided no.
and
But
like they'll always be like, oh my God, of
but
course I'll stand up for you.
woo,
And then the
yes,
situation starts, you'll see them shaking in front of their
hey,
moms, not able to say anything.
problems.
But I think, as I'm listening to you, I'm realizing that I do have a red flag that
Mhm.
I noticed. And to me, the red flag is about how she felt at every key moment,
Yeah.
sorry, of their relationship. Like, I remember that she said that, at the wedding, she felt unsettled. She felt like
Mm,
something was off. As she
oh,
was delivering their first child, she felt unsettled. She felt
mm,
disconnected and she felt like something was off. And I think it's just another reminder sometimes of the fact that intuition is so powerful. And like
yeah.
sometimes it's just a feeling with no, rational explanation about why you feel a certain way, etc. And we're so quick to just like dismiss
Mm,
that feeling. But I find that sometimes it's enough grounds to say, I don't know exactly what's going on, but
oh, wait.
let me be woke. Let me stay woke because they always say, intuition is God whispering to you or God talking to you. And I find that regardless of like what people believe in, intuition is often the one thing that people are like, listen to it. Just
Mm-mm-mm.
listen to it because it's
That
one.
I do, however, believe that a lot of the time it's because we don't trust ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going off of what I've been through just in life generally. And I do know that a lot of the time the message was always clear, but I didn't believe in myself enough to say this is my intuition and I'm going to own it,
Mm-hmm.
or something that we often tend to forget is the courage to follow your intuition.
Yeah.
Because when intuition comes to play, a lot of the time it's for really hard decisions. It can be for really hard decisions, and you've got to have like the courage to follow the intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time we need a push from the universe, if not the first night time,
Yeah.
not the time, the third time,
Yeah. And I think it's
or I mean,
also
how many
hard
times?
I mean, I'm saying listen to your intuition as if it's easy, but it's also so hard to actually distinguish, like, out of all the thoughts that go through your mind,
Mm.
what is intuition and what is your, I guess, self-doubting
Ouais,
self,
ouais. Mm,
like
mm.
telling you things that are, again, based on your insecurities and your traumas and stuff like that. And sometimes your intuition is speaking and you're like, oh, I guess it's just my insecurities that are making me, want to find something bad in all the good things happening to me. But
Ouais.
yeah, it's
Mm,
tricky.
mm. Definitely. Well,
Mm.
this second part is as insane as the first one, if not more.
Hmm.
So once again, we can't wait for the feedback. We can't wait for the discussions and the chats.
Yes, guys, enjoy this episode and see you soon.
Enjoy.
My mom called me and she tried to locate me. She found, I guess I told her where I was. So she came up, she found me there and just did not want me to stay there by myself. She wanted to be there. I said, no, no, no. I just need time. I'll be all right. I'll figure it out because I've always figured it out. And so she went back home. What I didn't know is that he had followed my mom to that location. So now he knew where I was and made sure that he kind of stuck around in the hotel lobby trying to talk to me. I don't think I came back down that day. I stayed there for 3 days, still trying to figure it out. But to be honest, I had no idea what to do. I was just traumatized. I just didn't know what to do. And maybe going through post-traumatic stress, also just had a baby not too long ago. Things just went really weird. And at that point, I know that he called me, he texted me excessively and told me that he needed to talk to me. We need to figure this out. He didn't want me to find out that way, but he just doesn't know. He's pretty like uncertain on the whole thing that transpired. He wants to talk to me but doesn't know how to approach me. Could I give him a chance? He also wants to be in the life of our child. Can I give him a chance? The chance I gave him was over a simple conversation in a restaurant after the 3 days I stayed in the hotel. And he told me that he was sorry again. I think I was sent back to that time when we got engaged. He was sweating. He was all like he had a very long conversation with somebody, couldn't find his words, but was apologetic and telling me how he doesn't know what happened. But yes, he does have a child. I'm right. The child is one, and he doesn't know how to even be the right father. He's confused. He came up with all kind of justification that just didn't justify the action. Then my first words were, So you're trying to tell me that you made a mistake. And again, me coming up with what I thought were the correct words to lead him in the direction that I thought was right. But that wasn't correct at all. He said to me, I made no mistakes. I just had a child, but it wasn't a mistake. Okay, I said, excuse me? He said, no, if I say that I made a mistake, that means that my child is a mistake. I said, no, the child is not a mistake. The child is a blessing, but your action is a mistake, right? No, it's not. So I said, so if it's not a mistake, that means it's intentional? Well, I wanted her to have the child. Okay, I'm confused. I also have a child. We got married. We conceived the baby not too long after getting married. Then the blame shifted to, I've always wanted to have a baby. But, your career came first. And I felt like you were never within the right time frame to have a child. So then I said, you purposely had a child to hurt me? He said, no, it wasn't to hurt you. It's just that I never believed that I was going to have a long life. So I didn't want to waste time. And the excuses made absolutely zero sense. And he kept on going. And I said, my last words were, you know what? We need counseling. Because I can't figure this out. I don't think you can figure it out. What you're saying doesn't make sense to me. And I kept pressing on the fact that he's not saying he made a mistake. But I'm not going to understand that because I was in a state of hurt. I was sad. I was confused. Then I started to look for allies. I started to talk about it a little bit more to people closer to me, except my friends. I was talking to my mom excessively and I was just talking and talking and I felt very crazy. I felt like talking. I had to talk at that point. Then I also felt like we had to go through counseling. And he said to me, no, we don't need counseling. I know I will figure this out, but we don't need counseling. I said, no, wait, we need couples counseling because we won't be able to get out of this trying to make decisions for ourselves. Nobody makes sense. And it's like having a conversation with a wall. So we eventually went to counseling, but I think that was also a one-sided choice. I wanted to go to counseling. He didn't want to go. So when we started seeing our couples counselor, the stories went one-sided again. I talked excessively and he said absolutely nothing. The counselor kept on asking him questions and he said, I know what to do. I don't need this. And it was very funny to me. At some point, I realized how much I was talking when during one of our counseling sessions, the counselor dozed off a little. I said, wow. At that point, I realized, you know what? She's not the right counselor for us. She dozed off. And I'm like, oh my gosh. At that point, we're seeing the counselor. And I'm talking to my mother. And I realized that the time frame when the child got conceived didn't make any sense. And I asked him, and he told me that the child got conceived before the wedding. But when I back calculated, that person would have been 12 months pregnant if the child got conceived before the wedding. So it had to have been after. What I didn't realize is that he made a very short and quick trip to the Caribbean while he was abroad, while he was in another state. And we didn't spend too much time on it. He had told me that he misused his school funds and had to make some money, but he asked an uncle of his to help him out. So the uncle told him to come over because the uncle was in the Caribbean. So he went on a 2-day trip. Mind you, that's when the child got conceived. So that was something that I didn't figure out quick enough. But when it clicked, when that short trip came back freshly to my brain. I screamed. I said, oh my God, it all makes sense now. So that was another confrontation that I had while we were going through couples counseling. I brought up that you lied to me about when the child got conceived. Now, I wasn't asking questions anymore. I was just pushing the facts. The child got conceived during that trip you took 3 months after our wedding. Correct? I don't even need your answer. I know it's correct. And he couldn't talk. So anyway, the conversation with the counselor didn't seem to go anywhere. Or should I say, it just didn't really help me because we couldn't get through him. He claimed he knew exactly what he had to do, and he would do that. So then I started to go through therapy at school because I was working at the university, where the 4-year university where I went to. I had counseling services available to me. So I started to go. And I would say by far, it made a world of difference to go to that therapist. She was more efficient. She was alert. She would stop me when I would say certain things. She would bring me back to my past, to the time of, my childhood. Why did I make certain decisions growing up, such as cutting off my father when he wasn't in my life, getting mad at my brother when my brother was not really doing certain things. Like I would have the habit of cutting people off based on the stories I was feeding her. But I had no ability to change my path with my husband at the time or tell him things like, that's enough. I always wanted him to bring up the right words to me to convince me for things to keep going in the direction that we were going. So fast forward to the time when the mother of the child, now being 100% in his life, I discovered so many more texts and conversations. They were having a full-blown relationship in my face, but he thought I wasn't seeing anything. Coming back to the time where she now insisted on having her daughter being supported the same way my son was supported at the time. Coming to that time, I realized she was aware of what was going on in our lives. And the only way she could be aware of that was if he shared it with her. And that's exactly what was happening. I started again on my investigative ways. I started recording. I would walk out of the car and leave my phone on, voice memos and listen to conversations, because as soon as I would leave, whether I was going to work or I was going anywhere away from him, he would call her. He would have conversations, and by the time I would walk back in the car, the conversations would stop. And he was unaware that I knew all of that. And I started keeping track of all his actions, still while keeping in touch with my counselor and telling my counselor all these things. My counselor had to remind me that my best abilities were in my studies and I should stop trying to be an investigator. I should focus on my other strength, because I probably had the potential of running a case at that point because of all the information I found. And at that point, I wasn't meeting up with him about any of the stuff that I was finding, but I was talking to his mother and I was making his mom aware. So on his mother's side, when she found out about it was a bit strange. She told me that she was just aware when I told her about it. But come to find out, she was lying. She had covered up for him for months prior to the time I found out. And everything that I was saying, she kept trying to mold me into that very nice person that she thought I was, and I would accept the situation. And she really tried to convince me that it would make sense for us to break history and not let history repeat itself. And so she didn't want me to turn my back on a child that was born out of wedlock. She wanted me to bring the child in. And that's the only way she could see our relationship work. All her advice revolved around, it's a little child, she's innocent, she didn't want to be here, but you can make it work. And the backstory to that is the fact that she herself was the child of, she was the child of a mother that pursued a married man, but she never got the chance to grow up in a two-parent home, and she just didn't want that to repeat for the child. At that point, I was surprised that she would tell me that, and I was still trying to see if it made sense, but I still hadn't figured it out. So, when I eventually realized that I had become enemy number one to my husband and his mistress, is when I just took action. I would realize he didn't know I was always in the phone that they used. He didn't know I knew the password, but I was still reading, still hurting myself doing that. I was still reading the conversations, and it went a little bit like the mother wanted to bring her daughter and wanted to come, so they had to figure out a way to find her a husband so she could become a US citizen and stay in the country. That's how the conversation went. That's how serious they were about their relationship. So at that point, I confronted him and I told him, I don't think I understand this thing, and I don't think I want any part of it anymore. I'm getting fed up. Nothing is working in our direction. Things are getting amplified in this direction. It looks like that's where you want to be. Why don't you go? Why don't you just choose her? What are you doing with me? And I do have to emphasize on the fact that he was absent as a father to our child. He wasn't even there emotionally. He wasn't taking care of the baby. He couldn't see straight. His attention was over there. He was calling the mom and the daughter constantly, and our son, I felt, was left out. So I confronted him about all of that, and I said to him, you should go. You should not stay in this relationship. It's unhealthy. We're becoming very toxic. We can't even converse. Like, there's no conversation that makes sense. We used to be very open with one another, and it's just not happening anymore. That's when he kind of dropped a bomb on me as to why he was behaving like that. So the reason why he wasn't opening up to the counselor, or he wasn't opening up to me, was because he was trying, in quotation, to trick the child's mother and make her believe, his words, that he was so in love with her so he could get a hold of their baby and break things off. I said, that doesn't make any sense. What are you doing that for? He said that he was doing that because he heard that the mother said that if he doesn't take care of her daughter like he's taking care of our son, he would never be in their daughter's life. So he had a different strategy about how to hurt her for saying that, because he absolutely wanted the child, and that was his way to revenge, in quotation again. So when I found that out, I said, all right, what am I signing up for? This whole situation doesn't make sense. As a mother myself, I wouldn't want anybody to treat me like that. I wouldn't want the person I'm with to be that kind of person. Do I really want to be in this relationship? But I still did not have the courage to just up and leave. I was still around, completely disconnected, washing a lot of dishes for some reason because it felt very therapeutic to me. The sensation of water on my hand was just an escape. I'm not sure why, but that was my way of coping. I was always in the kitchen, having these blank stares, not knowing what was going on. So the story went that eventually he worked really hard with his mother to make the child come to the US. And that baby arrived in our home at 18 months. So he convinced the mother on the basis that she would follow afterwards, and continued the full-blown relationship to try to trick the mom into believing that she'll come so he could have the child stay in the country for at least 6 months until she became a resident. That was his work. And that was their work because his mom was fully a part of it. They had already retained a lawyer, and the lawyer was on the case. The lawyer was going off of the information he received. The lawyer thought that I was okay with the situation and we would have become this couple that was going to take care of the child because the child was in the care of her mom, who was not apt to take care of the baby properly and also threatened to take the child away from him. So that's the case. The case was built on all these, I would call them information. I can't really say it was lies because I was not fully aware of what the situation was. But on my end, it just didn't feel right at all. I remember the night she came, I was even more confused. The poor child was sick. She had a fever, very high fever. They literally acted like they ran away. And that's just what it looked like. So fast forward to the time where they interacted with their lawyers. The lawyer tried to convince him to do everything he could for the child to stay in the country for 6 months for the case to start. When I figured out what was going on, and I was still tracking the conversation that Andrew and his mistress had at the time, I realized that I was a distraction to her. It was, she's not acting right. She's in the house. She doesn't talk. She's weird. She's this. It was me that was their subject of conversation, but that was his way to distract the mistress into believing that he was really leaving me, don't worry, and dragging on for the case to start. So I went on one day and picked up my phone and called her. And I told her, I'm going to tell you something. I know you don't expect my phone call, but I want you to start focusing on your child. I see all of your conversation and it hurts my heart. I know the situation is really messed up. What you guys did to me is so bad. But what's coming for you, you're not going to like. I'm warning you right now, I'm not your problem. Focus on your child. And one last thing I can tell you is, if I were to leave my husband this very second, he still wouldn't be with you. I really was hoping she understood that as what it was, what I was trying to convey. But she told him that I said those words. So he did damage control at that point and said, oh my God, she's awful. I can't believe that's what she said. It's not right. But I don't know. I felt like she also took my words for what they were and wanted to figure out who was lying and who was telling the truth, because 10 days after that phone call, we received a subpoena to be in court. I wouldn't say we received. He received the subpoena because he was called into court for kidnapping. So at that point, I realized that she got what I was trying to tell her. And all hell broke loose. He was upset. They started to put their case into motion because it wasn't the 6 months yet. But things had to happen. They contacted their lawyer. The lawyer started to build the case and it started to go on the attack. They sent her a reply that it's not true. She abandoned her child. And the whole full-blown court case started. And they went back and forth. She was not living in the country, so she had to find a way to come, so get the visa based on the court documents. And she found now a quick way to get here, but it wasn't quick enough for her to make it before the 6 months deadline. By the time she was in the country, it was already 6 months, so her child was a resident. But that's a detail she didn't know. And they went to court. Just to not go too much in depth into the court process, with my investigative ways, I think I helped their case somehow, because I had so much information that I brought up to him about their interaction and how they were having a full-blown relationship while we were married. He conveyed that information to his lawyer, and his lawyer used that information against the mother to say that she knew very well that he was married and still pursued him to try and come to the state. So this was what made her lose her kidnapping case. And at that point, she lost the child, but she decided not to leave the country. She stayed. She never returned in the Caribbean. So that was another problem on its own, but I'm here in this relationship that makes zero sense to me, thinking it's gonna get better. It never got better. During all that time, during all that trial, during all these investigative ways that I was having, I still had to care for my 4 months old, a child that we had in the house, and his daughter that he had with his mistress. She came over, she stayed in the house, she was very young. And this was a time that was very weird. It was very difficult because I was also going through my exams at school. I was trying to juggle through everything. It was very stressful. But the child was there and she didn't ask to be here. At first, I didn't know how I would feel. I'd never been in that situation. I was looking outwards to a similar situation with a couple that was close to us, with the husband that cheated on his wife a few days after they got married and had a baby. They had separated for about 3 years before coming back together and raising and loving that child that the husband had out of wedlock. So I thought, again, looking at this relationship, I tried to mirror it with my own and say, if they can do it, why can't I? And I'm not the only child on my dad's side. My dad has several kids, but the problem with me is it's not a good example because we're not that close. So what I was trying to do on my end was build that relationship between his daughter and my son where they would be very close. I was trying to be different. Don't know why, but that was my approach. But to everybody else that was close to him, I was being suspicious because they didn't believe that I would love that child the same way I would love my child. And it was everybody was criticizing what they hadn't seen from me to him. And I felt really hurt about that because I didn't think I was that kind of person. But during this whole trial, he was always also mentioning certain things. And I give one example. One day he went out with his friends in the morning. I'm not a morning person. I would wake up late. But I woke up and I realized he was gone. And the children were there. So I woke up and I said, oh my gosh, this is the first time I'm there by myself. I got no help. And what can I do here? I will put my firstborn in the bed and wash, his daughter. And when I was done, I would put her back in the bed and take our son and wash him. And then I put them both back in the bed and take a shower and make sure they are okay. By the time he came back, the little girl was crying hysterically. And he thought that I hadn't touched her. I had left her in the bed and I wasn't really caring for her. And he said that. And at that point, I just came out of the shower, half washed, and I screamed. I said, I can't believe that you intentionally left me so you could come back and judge my actions. This didn't make any sense to me. But that was how it went in the house a lot. A lot of discussions or arguments were about me being a mother. Was I a good mother? I was being judged in a situation that I didn't choose to be in. So, of course, the dynamic changed in the house. I was caring for 2 children. We had our moments where we would be great and we would still have some form of intimacy, and some moments where we would be really off and we wouldn't touch each other or be close and be distant. And one day we had an argument in the house over something as small as a remote. I was watching a show. He had been out for hours. I was with the kids. We were watching TV and having, some quick conversations and laughing. He came in, he switched the channel, and I said, no, you can't just walk in and change the channel. Let me go back to my show. And I told the kids, guys, isn't that right? Daddy can't just walk in after being out for 3 hours and just change. And the kids were like, yeah, Daddy can't do that. And they tried to punch him. And he said, no, I'm going to change it. And so we had a fake fight. I grabbed the remote and Daddy's like, no, give me back. But I could sense that he was annoyed with the little argument that I was coming up with. I took the remote and the kids kind of followed me, grabbing the remote. And he pulled the remotes out of our hands and took it back, changed the channel. And I said, oh my God, attack, let's go. We're going to just jump on Daddy. And he just wasn't in the mood of being playful with us. And he went into this rough little fake fight that turned me into this, person that was getting my clothes pulled and even ripped off. And I said, wow, what is this? So the kids now realized that I was, he had ripped off my clothes. I had a little wrap tied around me. The kids now jumped on the wrap and said, oh my God, mommy, cover. And I put it back. And I was now really shocked at the action that he took. And I told him, I said, well, I don't appreciate you doing that in front of the kids. But I didn't make a big fuss because I never wanted to argue in front of the kids. So at some point I went upstairs and I started to put things into, I did laundry and I put things away. And we went and put the kids in their room. While I was putting things away, he said, why are you putting, the little girl's clothes in her closet? My stepdaughter's clothes were in her closet in her room. He had a problem with that. He said that even the cleaning ladies are better mothers than me because the cleaning ladies put clothes wherever they see things. They put everybody's towels wherever they saw the towels. But I specifically moved her towel in her bedroom because of closet space. And I kept our son's towels at the bottom of his drawer, and that was an issue. So when he made that mention of me being a bad mother, or, the cleaning ladies are a better mother than me, and I felt very diminished. I felt really, I felt insulted. So at that point, we had 2 arguments that night, and I was upset. And the cherry on top of the cake was when he compared me now to his helper he had back home. That very same night, he said he thought he had a helper in me, and he specifically called out his helper's name instead of a bad mother like I'm being right now. Oh, that was it. I just literally grabbed my things, took our baby. I didn't even care. I just grabbed him and I walked out of the house. But I left my stepdaughter there. But what else could I have done? That wasn't my child. And that's what he kept beating into my head. So I just literally left and I went to stay by my mother. And at that point, we were on a no talking term. I wasn't talking to him. And when I left a few weeks later, I found out that I was pregnant again. So I'm living by my mother, and I found out because I was having morning sickness, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor checked me. We did an ultrasound, and the doctor said, "Oh, you're having very strong morning sickness, aren't you?" I said, "Yes," and I don't know what's going on, but it seems like I'm pregnant. And she said, "Yes, you're having twins." So when I found out that I was pregnant with twins, in the back of my mind, I actually wanted the situation between us to get better. So I had one last trip that I really wanted to take with us and with all of us. It was him and I took both the children, and I even had my mother and my brother traveling with us. We went to Hawaii, and of course I love beaches, so being close to the water just made a difference. It's a different atmosphere, and it just made me feel good. But I think that was my last resort since I found out that I was pregnant with twins, to maybe make him realize that he is missing out on a family. Maybe that was my last resort. And we went, and the trip did not go as great as I was hoping for. He wasn't paying so much attention to me. He was just going out more at night. I mean, Hawaii time was very different from where I lived. So I had a hard time staying up very late for the first few days. And so he would take advantage of that and just be out on the town. That was our second time going to Hawaii. The first time we went for a wedding earlier in our marriage, and it was a lot more exciting. So that was the reason why I chose Hawaii. I thought maybe it would revive old memories and we would have a very good time. But things did not go according to plan. And he was a little bit more argumentative. And at some point we were in the car and we were discussing future plans. And he said to me that, have I not realized that the relationship is just not working out? Everything he says, I'm against, or we have more arguments. It feels like it's time for him to close this chapter. And I said, all right, well, you can close the chapter after I'm telling you that we're expecting again. And he said, what do you mean? You playing, right? I said, no, I'm not. We are expecting. And he just kind of went on the, what? Don't know what to do, but excited, but confused as to where are we really going to go with this. And I kept the news about it being twins until we came back to the state. And I told him that he should tell his mom also that we are expecting. And I wanted to know what her reaction would be. So he didn't really tell me at that point. But then I told him, we're having twins. And I said that, I think via text, that you're going to be a father of 2 babies. And I wanted to do it via text because I was having also the ultrasound pictures that I could share. And at that point, we met up. Since we were already separated, we met up at our children's school to pick them up. And I said, did you see my text today? Because when I sent it, he didn't respond. He said, yes, I saw it. I said, so what do you think? His first response was, that's going to be hard. I said, hard? Yeah, it's going to be hard. I said, what did your mom say? Was she excited? He said, well, she thought that was going to be hard too. She thinks financially it's not going to be easy. So that was the first thought for him. Financially, this is going to be hard. I said, all right, no problem. So our conversations were very short. We would just come pick up. We really try to bring a united front in front of the children, still coming in. Even though we were still living separate, I wanted to make sure that the kids knew we were both in their lives. And that's when at some point he decided that it would be best for him to just not be here anymore. And I think it was probably triggered by the fact that he had he would see himself being the father of 4 children. So he ran away from the situation, is what I think happened. He left the country. He came to say bye to us, and he claimed that it would be best for him to bring back his daughter to their home country. It's just not what he envisioned. And also, her mom being here is not what he envisioned. So he doesn't want her in his business. He's leaving. And that's how he left and stayed there on purpose. And that's how we went our separate ways. But still, that didn't give me the courage to pursue a divorce. I was still going through my confusion. And I remember me going to my hairstylist, and she asked me, at that point, I had said this situation to so many people because talking helped so much. And I realized I wish I had started talking earlier, which I didn't. But at that point, I was just talking. And my hairstylist told me, so what are you doing now? What are you going to do now? Is the question she asked me. He's gone. You here. You're raising 3 kids by yourself. What are you going to do? At that point, I went home. That very night, I opened my Facebook because I had a whole bunch of pictures of us and, a whole bunch of shared friends. I felt ashamed. I couldn't tell those friends. Weirdly enough, I didn't really explain to a lot of friends what was going on, but I felt really embarrassed. I felt like I was just carrying on a lie to some of my friends. I wasn't true to myself. And that very night, when I opened my Facebook, I saw that he had already hooked up with another girl in his home country and had her completely, on Facebook. And mind you, we had 40 friends in common. So that's it. That's what I was not trying to show was right there in front of everybody. So I had nothing else to hide. And that was that night that I decided to be that petty and remove every single picture that we had together. Remove everything. And that feeling of removing things felt like I was removing him from my life. And I started looking for a divorce lawyer and went through the process. So we divorced. To me, love is still that strong feeling that you have. It could be of affection or concern that you have, but it's also that strong feeling that you don't want to let go. You still want to pour in so much energy and try to make sure that wherever you direct that feeling or that energy, the person is happy. The person knows that you care. It has that. I mean, for me, it's still that. It's still that very strong feeling. So
Hi there. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to see more of us, you can check us out on whatislove_podcast on Instagram. If you're interested in giving us some more formal feedback, or if you'd like to tell us your story, you can also send us an email on whatislovepod@gmail.com. You can also leave us a 5-star rating if you love it. And until next time, see you soon.